All right, this is the Brain Physiology and Functions Section A lecture. Our prioritized standards are 3B. Objectively, we're going to analyze the components and functions of brain communication. The nervous system is an extensive network of nerve cells that carry messages to pulses of electrical and chemical signals throughout the body. The building block of the entire nervous system is the neuron, which is a cell specialized to receive, process, and transmit information to other cells in the body, which has three major classes of neurons, which are sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. Neurons, if you haven't noticed, is another way to say nerve cells. Now, sensory neurons, that will be the first one here. These are neurons that carry messages from sense receptors toward the central nervous system. So this is like a one-way street feeding sensory experiences, like when we have vision or hearing, taste, touch, smell, pain, balance, all of that going to our brain, sometimes referred to as afferent neurons. So like your receptor cell could be something like your skin cells or just whatever the neuron might, whatever the sense might be. Motor neurons, these are neurons that carry messages away from the central nervous system toward the muscles, organs, and glands. So this one's like a one-way street again, but this time sending messages from the brain to the various body parts, sometimes referred to as afferent neurons. So again, coming from the brain and then to the different, again, muscles, organs, or glands. And the last type is interneurons, which are neurons that relay sensory messages between other neurons or to motor neurons, sometimes in complex pathways. Now, this acts kind of like a middleman between the sensory and the motor neurons. The brain is mostly a network of billions of intricately connected interneurons. So they're not going to be the sensory or the motor, but again, they relay between those in the sense of the motor neurons, or the interneurons, rather. The primary components of the neuron include the soma, the dendrites, the axon, and also the synapses, which we'll talk about momentarily. Now, the soma, this is a part of the cell containing the nucleus, which is going to include all the chromosomes, also known as the cell body. So if you've had science before, that shouldn't be new. Also, we have dendrites, so several of these are going to be our dendrites. These are fibers extending from the soma that receive messages from direct simulation, things like pressure, light, sound, or from other neurons. Now, an axon, this is a long cylinder projection that conducts electrical impulses away from the soma. So this is like a pathway toward the next neuron. And then we have synapses, which are microscopic gaps that serve as specialized junctions or communication links between the neurons. So toward the end here is where you would see your synapses be. Now, while neurons have the ability to send messages that produce simple reflexes, so like when you touch something that's hot, as a for instance, neurons also have the ability to make connections or to strengthen old connections in a process known as plasticity, which is the nervous system's ability to adapt or change as the result of experience. Through plasticity, neurons can actually sprout new dendrites to make new connections, which is associated with learning. So as this shows, we had a neuron, and then it sprouted more dendrites, and then even more dendrites. Now, research suggests that plasticity helps the nervous system adapt to physical damage, as it allows the brain to be restructured and reprogrammed. So this explains how the brain can compensate after an injury like a severe head trauma or possibly from a stroke. Neuroplasticity can produce changes in both the brain's functions and its physical structure in response to experiences. So like traumatic experiences can actually alter the brain's emotional responses that can cause what used to be mild stressors or merely unexpected surprises to lead to major reactions. So kind of like when people have post-traumatic stress disorder. So again, dendrites form connections that didn't exist before. Now, messages being transported from one neuron to another are aided by neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that carry, boost, and balance signals between neurons and other cells in the body for that matter, across a synapse. Now, neurotransmitters are released when electrical signals are sent down the axon in a process that's called action potential, crossing the synaptic gap and attaching to receptors on the intended neuron. Now, neurotransmitters are housed in what are called the terminal button, which is found at the end of the axon. So, it's like housed here is where they are stored. They only come out when necessary, though. Now, since a synapse is a gap, although a very microscopic one at that, a neurotransmitter helps electrical signals either continue onto another neuron or be unable to carry onto another neuron. So, when necessary, essentially, the neurotransmitters create a bridge, and when necessary, they create a barrier, keeping it from going on to the next one. Now, neurotransmitters kind of act like a key that can actually unlock certain reactions onto the receiving cell. So, what reaction is going to depend on actually what type of neurotransmitter is going to be used, because there are different types. Now, neurotransmitters can cause excitatory or inhibitory response. When an excitatory response occurs, neurotransmitters bind to the receptors and cause the electrical signals to be transmitted onto another cell. So essentially, they create a bridge in a sense. When an inhibitory response occurs, the neurotransmitters block the signal from continuing and prevent the electrical signal from being transmitted onto another cell. So essentially, when necessary, it can produce that wall instead of producing that bridge. Now, there are dozens of different neurotransmitters important in psychological and physical functioning, like dopamine that produces sensations of pleasure and reward, serotonin that regulates sleep and dreaming and mood, endorphins that influence pleasurable sensations and controls pain, acetylcholine, sorry, I'm not a science teacher, that is involved in learning and memory. So it's like I was attempting to say that one. Public school. Now, imbalances in neurotransmitters are believed to underlie certain mental disorders. Many drugs used to treat mental disorders employ chemicals that act like neurotransmitters, hoping to compensate for the imbalance that might be occurring. Now, illegal drugs, things like heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, these either mimic, enhance, or potentially inhibit the brain's natural neurotransmitters. The endocrine system, or the hormone system, this sends signals that support and sustain responses initiated by the nervous system through chemical messengers known as hormones that originate from the endocrine glands, which include pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, gonad glands. Here's lots of glands for you. Check that out. So again, a lot of times the the nervous system is going to start a process, but usually it's the endocrine system that continues that process for an extended period of time. Now, the hormones released through the various glands making up the endocrine system influence bodily functions, behaviors, and even emotions. Now, once hormones are secreted into the bloodstream, hormones circulate throughout the body until delivered to targeted muscles, glands, and also organs. Under normal conditions, the endocrine system helps support basic body functions of the nervous system. Now, when encountering a crisis, the endocrine system can release hormones like adrenaline or cortisol that actually sustain the body's defensive reactions, which are known as fight or flight, where you are aided in either fighting off a threat or possibly aided in running away from that threat. Now, the cooperation between the nervous system and the endocrine system are the biological causes behind our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Now, problems with a person's biology can actually result in a variety of unforeseen effects on the brain and mental functions. So, things like stroke, Alzheimer's disease, or mental illness, as for instance. All right, that was brain physiology. Physiology and function, section A lecture. Our prioritized standard again was 3B. Objectively, now you can analyze the components and functions of brain communication.